coming here today to listen to this talk. So today we're going to talk about individual actions against waste, especially in the context of COVID-19. So a bit about me, I'm a second year PhD student at the University of Toronto. I study plastic pollution. So not only do I do a lot of grassroots organization work around waste reduction, but I also study it. So we're going to do a quick Zoom poll to start off. We have some questions for you. The first one is, where are you from? So you can choose your country or part of the country. So do I keep asking the question, I guess?
Sorry, we're just trying to launch the poll.
Cool. One question at a time.
Yeah. Stephanie, are you able to launch the poll from GLO?
Yes. Is it not launched?
You have to click the first question and then click on launch poll.
Okay, give me a sec.
Oh,
Yeah.
it worked. It worked. Okay.
So do I ask the next question and then we get all three answers at the end?
Yeah, so each question will show up separately.
Okay, cool. So next question, have you done a waste audit before? Oh, okay, here's where we're all from. So seems like a lot of us are from Canada and the Western United States. And there's also people from Eastern US, Midwest US, and Taiwan. So welcome. Great. So next question. Have you done a home waste audit in the past? So choose your answer. We'll wait a few seconds for the answers to come in. All right, so seems like most of us haven't done a waste audit before. Kudos to the 1 or 2 people who have. That's why we're here, to learn about the process. So our last question is, which do you do more, reuse, reduce, or recycle? Right, so take a few moments to submit your answer. All right, results in. So 50% of us say we do recycling the most, followed by 30% reuse and 20% reduce. I'm very proud of you. I must say I recycle a lot. But today we'll cover a lot of tips around all 3 of these solutions to reducing waste. Great, so thanks for your cooperation. All right, so let's jump straight into what we're going to discuss today. First, I'll give a brief overview of the UFT trash team and what we do, explain the home waste audit, and then we'll give you a quick survey to ask you what kinds of objects, what kinds of products you've thrown away in the past week, just to get you started. And then we'll show you a quick video or 2 about reusing, repurposing plastic items, which I find very cool. Provide you with some general waste reduction tips with a specific focus on the pandemic period, and finally wrap up. So UFT Trash Team is based within the University of Toronto. We actually stemmed from Chelsea Rockman's research lab. So we're a whole bunch of us are students at the university as well, but as well as community members. And our overall goal is to reduce waste, take direct action, but also to increase waste literacy in the community. So the kinds of events we do range from educational, so we make lesson plans for middle school and high schools on plastic pollution. We also do a lot of public outreach, and we host a lot of cleanups on beaches and in our rivers. So we're very active in the community. And this past summer, we hosted our first ever home waste audit. So one major drive for this was the fact that with COVID-19, it is hard to do beach cleanups because it's hard to social distance. But we thought it'd be really nice to do something at home, since we're all at home right now. And we can make a big difference with the amount of waste we produce. So the overall objectives, there's three main objectives to the home waste audit. First one is to learn about the waste stream in the municipality where you live. So learn about what bins you have, recycling, landfill, organic, what goes in each of them. Second is to measure your waste footprint, and finally learn ways to decrease your waste footprint. So a bit of background on the plastic problem. So plastic production exponentially increased since 1950s. Since then, people have resorted to single-use plastic items as basically an excuse to not do household chores. And now we're so used to having plastic in every aspect of our lives that it's really hard to imagine not having plastic at all. So ever since 1950, as you can see, plastic production has increased drastically. Now we produce around 26,000 million metric tons of plastic. If this trend continues, by 2050, we will have produced 26,000 million metric tons, which is huge. And so, as you can see, the plastic problem is a huge issue. Plastic is important in many aspects of our lives, from communication to transport, to safety, to medicine, right, hygiene purposes. And there's no denying that plastic is cheap, quick to produce, lightweight, durable, and is very useful for many purposes. However, there are many aspects in our lives where we use plastic, but we might not necessarily need it. So this is especially true for single-use plastic items like cups and takeout containers and bags. So the plastic we don't need, a lot of it ends up polluting the environment. And once they escape to the environment, it's very hard to clean them up. The plastic pollution problem essentially is, in 2016, 11% of plastic waste generated globally entered aquatic ecosystems. The problem is that once it gets there, it's very difficult for plastic to decompose. And I don't mean fragment or break down into smaller and smaller pieces. That's not decomposing. In this case, the plastic persists and does not become inert organic materials or inorganic materials like water and carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, it just gets smaller and smaller and it accumulates in the environment. Plastic pollution is a problem because it threatens wildlife through entanglement, ingestion, and plastic-associated chemicals. So 40% of the plastic produced is single-use packaging. And the majority of plastic ends up either in the landfill or the environment. So in this presentation, yes, recycling is treated as a solution, but is lower down in the hierarchy of solutions because unfortunately, only 9% of plastic is recycled. Now, I don't want to say that recycling is not a solution because it is better than landfill. By recycling plastic, we reduce energy usage, the consumption of oil, CO2 emissions, and waste to landfill. Landfill is the last thing you want to happen to plastic, because once it's in the landfill, the opposite happens. You increase oil consumption, CO2 emissions, pollution, etc. So recycling is an option, but it always comes after reuse, refuse, and reducing. So what can we do as individuals? So we can reduce our consumption of single-use plastic items that we don't need in our lives, better manage our waste, and take part in community activities to clean up plastic that's already in the environment. That's right. So for example, in Canada alone, we produce 3.3 million tons of plastic waste every year, and 85% of that goes to landfill. So there's a lot that we can be doing to reduce that amount. So one term that you might have heard before, and we'll probably hear about a lot, is called wish cycling. So it's something that really hinders the recycling rate of plastic material. Wish cycling is basically throwing something in the recycling bin, hoping it can be recycled, but really it can't be recycled. And 25% of recyclable waste in Canada is rendered non-recyclable by contamination. If you throw something in the recycling bin that can't be recycled, for example, plastic cups lined with paper cups lined with plastic on the inside, you might end up contaminating the stuff that can be recycled. And that's a big problem because you're actually rendering recycling even more inefficient than it already is. So recycling is a bad thing. That's to keep in mind when you do your home waste audit. But recycling guidelines vary from city to city. Yeah, it's definitely different between countries and between state and provinces. It's mostly up to the municipality or district to determine recycling guidelines. You need to learn yours because what happens in Toronto, where I live, is probably different from what happens where you live, unless you live in Toronto. For instance, in Toronto, these items can be recycled. So solid for hard plastics, a lot of that is recycled. We also recycle soft and stretchy plastics, metal, paper, etc. I just listed a few here. But because different recycling facilities, they have different machinery. Some are more advanced than others. For example, in a city where the machinery is more advanced, might be able to recycle black plastic or black items. In Toronto, anything that's black, black sushi containers, black takeout containers, those aren't recyclable. So it really varies from city to city, and to learn your municipality's recycling guidelines. So I did refer to a solutions hierarchy. So we talk a lot about this in our lesson plans with students. The solutions hierarchy basically lists what's the most important solution, and then all the way to the bottom, which is the least favorable action when it comes to waste. So refusing is always first, and then reduce, reuse, recycle, and finally, if avoidable, landfill. So keep this in mind. All right, so let's talk about the home waste audit that you're going to be doing as part of GLO. So it's going to be 4 weeks long. We're going to have a short poll now to estimate your current waste production volume. And I know it's a little bit of a sudden thing, so if you don't remember, just try your best to answer the questions as much as you can. Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, for this poll, the recycling and the garbage bins are combined, so just estimate the total number of each type of waste item that you throw out. I'm just reading through the chat. Near zero waste. Before the 70s, I'd say there's near zero plastic production. So that equates to, if you're not producing as much plastic, then there's not much plastic waste. That's why. The black lid on the Miracle Whip recyclable in Toronto. Yeah, anything that's black, plastic, is not recyclable in Toronto, unfortunately. Yeah. Yes, almond milk. Okay, I don't know what that means. All right, we have our poll results. So let's see. This is also for you to warm yourself up before the actual activity, home waste audit begins, to acquaint yourself with the amount of waste you produce. So it seems like the majority of people threw away 5 to 10 plastic items in the past week. Paper, between 0 to 5 and 10 to 15 are tied. Most people recycled threw away less than 5 metal items. And glass, also less than 5. And for other, it was less than 5. Great, so that was a warm-up exercise. So for the home waste audit, you'll also be doing something similar, except the recycling and the landfill ones will be separated. All right, so I mentioned that the audit will be 4 weeks long. Specifically for week 1, this is how we usually do it for during the summer. The first week, don't change your waste habit. So whatever you like eating, whatever products you buy, just keep doing that. So you get a baseline amount of how much waste you produce. Then the subsequent weeks, week 2, 3, and 4, we want you to look into your local waste management. So figure out exactly what items can be recycled, what items can't be recycled in your city, and try to implement some waste reduction tips, which I'll share later. So your goal is really to see a difference throughout the waste audit. So these are the data sheets that GLO will be providing you with. So you fill out your general information, number of people in your household, start date, notes. So for notes, something like really big happened, like you bought a huge amount of groceries, or you bought a huge amount of plastic for some reason, then note that. And it's very simple. So you'll have plastic, metal, glass, paper items, tables listed. You just list each item and how many of them you threw away. This is the garbage bin or the landfill waste data sheet. You also get a recycling data sheet. So obviously the items will be different, but it's the same idea. So for organics, some cities take organics, some cities don't. So if you have an organic waste bin, that's great. If not, if your city doesn't take it, just note it on your data sheet, because it's going to take up room in your garbage bin. So, oh yeah, for the data sheets, I forgot to mention, it doesn't show here, but it also asks you to estimate the volume of your bin. So yeah, you'll see on the data sheet, it asks you what's the volume of one bin, right? Because everyone's bin is different. Some bins are very big, some bins are very small. So what we did during the summer was, you just take the general shape of your bin. Like if it's cylindrical, you just do pi r squared times height to estimate the volume. If it's square, just do length times width times height to estimate the volume. Cool. All right, so task 4, research local waste management and reduction tips. So this is for weeks 2, 3, and 4. The first week, you just do whatever, live your lifestyle as you usually would. But for the subsequent weeks, we really want you to explore your waste management system and really understand it, and then try to reduce the amount of waste you produce. You can visit the UFT trash team reduction tips page. The resources, I'm sure GLO can provide you with those. Yeah. And then finally, share results. So at the end of the 4 weeks, you'll submit your results to GLO, and then they'll compile the data, show you the results, and reflect on what you learned during the home waste audit. And that's it. So pretty straightforward. It's going to be a great time, I'm sure, and hope you learn a lot about waste management in your city. So as a reward for getting through all of that, let's take a short breather, and I'll show you some cool reuse ideas. So the first video actually is to show you wish cycling. So if a paper cup is lined with plastic and you recycle it, it's wish cycling, because the truth is mixed materials can't be recycled, at least not in Toronto. Maybe in your facility, in your city, it can be recycled, like the machines can separate the plastic from the paper, but in Toronto, these cups go in the garbage. You can see all that plastic in the cup. All right, and the next video is to show you how to repurpose plastic bags and turn it into rope, and as well as a basket. So just sit back and relax. Great, so that's that. All right, so yeah, that was some videos about wish cycling and a neat idea for repurposing materials. There are lots of other cool videos as well on the UFT Trash Team website, YouTube channel if you're interested. They talk about upcycling, which is turning a discarded plastic object into something of equal or greater value of various household products. So for instance, they turn like toilet paper rolls into bird feeders. So they stick like seeds on them. That's pretty cool too. Yeah, so can have a look. All right, moving on. So waste reduction tips. So I mentioned the solutions hierarchy. In terms of specifics, here are some examples for things to think about when you're going through your home waste audit and think about where can I reduce or reuse or refuse plastics. In terms of refusing, you refuse extra packaging, food items that come with a lot of packaging. So in the supermarket, you see there's a lot of food items that are packaged like crazy in plastic. A noticeable example is fruits. I see a lot of packaged fruits in plastic containers. So instead of choosing that fruit, you can choose fresh fruits so that you avoid all that plastic packaging. And also there are a lot of stores, at least in Toronto, where you can go and fill up the food you want in bulk and bring your own bags and containers everywhere instead of getting their own containers. So that's also an option. In terms of reducing plastic, you can cook a meal instead of eating out. Very relevant for COVID. So you're reducing the amount of takeout containers used as well as the cutlery that comes with it. Repurposing items for other uses. So for example, bottles for flower pots, like the one below, t-shirts for shopping bags, bags for clothing line, like in the video we saw. And like I said before, recycling, it's not a true solution, but it's still better than landfill. Landfill is what we don't want. So I mentioned that right now we're in exceptional circumstances. Because of COVID-19, there have been setbacks to the kinds of sustainable habits that people have become used to. For instance, you can't bring your reusable mug to Starbucks and get your coffee filled at this point, not until at least the pandemic's over. We have seen a rise in single-use plastic. In fact, there was an article recently about how they found huge amounts of PPE washed up on the beaches of France, as well as around the ocean water in France. So it is a huge issue. But there are ways to combat that. So the problem is that we're increasingly relying on takeout options and single-use disposable items during this time, but there are ways to reduce the amount of single-use items we use. Obviously, use reusable masks. So not the single-use kinds like the one shown in the picture here. You can make your own mask. There's DIY videos on that. You can also purchase reusable masks in stores. When I order takeout, I always refuse the cutlery, especially if you're eating at home. If you're eating elsewhere, you need the cutlery. But if you're gonna order it and eat at home, might as well use the cutlery you have at home. Obviously, refrain from eating out once in a while, then you can cook a meal and you won't produce as much waste. And choose grocery shop options with less packaging, like I mentioned before. So there's a lot of ways in which we can still reduce waste, even during this time. So I want you to take a step back from talking about waste reduction and home waste audit and think more generally about the plastic pollution problem itself and global environmental issues. So this is actually something I'm also really interested in for my research, the connections between plastic pollution and climate. If you think about it, at every step of the plastic life cycle, from its manufacturing to refinement, purification, transportation, recycling, at every single point of its lifestyle, fossil fuels are burned. Actually, plastic is made from fossil fuels. And there are many connections between these huge environmental problems. The root of the problem, really, for both problems is consumerism and the unsustainable use of the Earth's resources. And I've been reading a lot of papers about this. And when in the plastic field, when we say what is the ultimate solution to the plastic pollution problem, it really is a circular economy. It's an economy in which plastics that are produced, they stay within the economy. They don't leave. They're not they don't escape into the environment. So every single piece of plastic we create, we're still using. And similarly with climate change, the ultimate solution really is a similar kind of sustainable resource use. This requires both systemic change and individual behavior change. So in terms of systemic change, it can include policy change, so the banning of plastic in various countries, or the banning of specific single-use items. Advocating for extended producer responsibility, so actually reflect the environmental damage that plastic has on the environment in its original cost, then it wouldn't be so cheap anymore. Then people wouldn't resort to it so easily. That also goes hand in hand with removing subsidies on fossil fuels. The only reason why virgin plastic is so much more affordable than recycled plastic is because companies have subsidies on fossil fuels, which make it so cheap. The reason why I say it is because as individuals, we can fight for that kind of big systemic change. We can tell people about the kind of policies we want by advocating for these policies. We can also tell companies that we support their philosophy, like their sustainable philosophy, through the products we buy and the alternatives we choose. So there's a lot we can do as individuals. So I want to end with that. Turn it over to Tiffany for some final words.
Thanks, Alice. Before I conclude, I just want to say thanks again for giving us such useful advice. Personally, it's really helpful to understand, like how much plastic we're using on a daily basis, and especially during COVID, I am very guilty of, using single-use items. So that was very wonderful to hear from you. And I just want to open up the floor to the audience. If you have any questions for Alice, you can use the raise hand function on Zoom, and then Alice, you can directly call on them to ask them to unmute themselves.
Sure, sounds great. All right. See the participants. Let's see who has their hand up. So far, I do see some chat. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Does anyone have their hand up? I don't think so.
Oh, there's one from Chelsea.
Chelsea, yes.
Hi, Alice. Thank you so much for the super informative presentation. I have a quick question about recycling. So you mentioned that it's not a true solution. Is the reason that is it not a true solution because we made it not to be one, meaning we recycle the wrong things, or we don't recycle certain things, and we are basically kind of damaging the supposed pipeline and life cycle of the products that we want to recycle?
Oh, great question. So not exactly. It is inefficient because we do that, because we recycle and we make it not as efficient. But the real reason why it's not a true solution is because when plastics are recycled, the polymer chain becomes shorter and shorter. So eventually it cannot be recycled anymore. So eventually it still ends up in the landfill. So what recycling really does is it prolongs the lifetime of plastics a little bit, but in the end, it still ends up in a landfill. So it's like delaying the ultimate fate of plastic. But the ultimate fate of plastic, when you refuse and reduce and reuse, is it still stays within the circular economy, or the economy itself. So its value is never lost. And that's why recycling is not a true solution.
I see. Got it. Thank you.
Well, let's see. Yeah, it sounds like. Anyone else have their hand up? And so far.
I think Nolan has a question.
Hi, Alice.
Hi.
Hey, yeah, I actually have a couple questions. My first question is, it sounds like plastic is the number one, worst thing. How about paper bags at the grocery store or cardboard like Amazon boxes? And then how about soda cans, the aluminum from those? How bad are those things?
Right, good question. So I'm making some plastic sound like it's the worst thing ever, but that's only because I study plastic and I'm so well acquainted with it. The truth is, anything that's single use is not the solution. So paper actually takes more energy to produce than plastic. I actually just realized this, learned this recently, but because there was some backlash when Canada announced its plan to ban plastic for single-use plastic items by next year. And there were some articles written where they say, oh, but replacing plastic with paper is just going to make the whole problem even worse, because paper also takes a lot of water and fossil fuels to make as well. So the truth is, anything that's single use is not the solution. I'm not sure how much more or less energy goes into making metal than plastic, but the ultimate solution really is a circular economy, which is always what we've been advocating for. Yeah, thanks for your question.
I think we have a question from Marisa.
Yeah, hey everyone. Thanks for that presentation. I think it was really informative and helpful. I just have a question regarding takeout materials. I know that takeout has become more popular now that restaurants are closed during COVID. And I'm just wondering if like what would be the most kind of takeout materials that are the most harmful to our environment, and which kind of takeout materials would you guys kind of recommend for restaurants to have?
Right. Good question. So at this time, as you know, we don't have much of a choice when it comes to takeout, because restaurants are closed, as you mentioned. And takeout, I've seen the styrofoam ones as well as the paper ones. There's some clear plastic ones as well. So in terms of what's harmful for the environment, there was a huge study on this where they assessed. So plastic, when it enters the environment, it breaks down to smaller and smaller pieces, right? So what this study was looking for was how harmful was each type of plastic to organisms tested in the lab, depending on what its shape was, as well as what its polymer was. So like they did a huge meta-analysis of like different polymers, like polyethylene, polystyrene, polypropylene, etc. They fed that to like a variety of different bioindicator species like fish, Daphnia, etc., as well as different shapes. So when plastics are in the environment, they come in different shapes. Some are fibers, some are fragments, some are spheres, etc. The consensus is that it seems that polystyrene is a very toxic plastic. Well, there's a lot of literature that says plastic is toxic, and then there's also a lot of null studies that say they haven't found any results. But it does seem that polystyrene has some toxic effects, especially I think it's because of something to do with the styrene monomer, the side chain. Yeah, so they did find that. It was really interesting because plastic is so diverse that it's hard to quantify exactly how harmful it is, but we are starting to see some negative impacts on fish and lab organisms. So my advice is, yeah, I don't think anyone's tested well, I haven't read any toxicity studies on paper, but paper takes a lot of water and fossil fuels to make as well. So like I said before, single-use items are not the solution. And yeah, but at this time we can't really help it. So yeah, we'll just have to get through this first.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Thank
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, it's a lot to explain.
Yeah.
I have a question. I don't know how to raise my hand though.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for this presentation. It was super informative.
No problem.
And I'm curious what your opinion is of like compostable plastics, like compostable cutlery, for example. I have my own opinions, but I'm curious what yours are.
Compostable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna sound like a broken tape recorder. Single-use plastic is not the ultimate solution, but I do think that if the actually compostable materials were marketed properly and people bought those, they do decompose in a certain amount of time. So the definition is for biodegradable is it has to be decomposed in 24 months in the environment. So there was a study done by 5 Gyres where they tested a whole bunch of biodegradable plastics. So there's a lot of greenwashing in the out there these days. So people say, "Oh, this plastic is biodegradable," but really, it's not. They label it bioplastics, but the reason why it's called bioplastic is because it's made from a certain type of organic source, but it's still made into polyethylene. So even though the source was biomatter, at the end of the day, it's still a polymer that will not degrade. Versus biopolymer is the actual biodegradable kind. But because there's so much greenwashing and mislabeling and markets wanting people to believe that the bioplastics are actually biodegradable, so then there's a lot of confusion. So the people buy this product believing that it will decompose in 24 months, but really it doesn't. So that's the main problem with compostable plastic. If people bought the correct product and companies weren't so misleading, I think it's still better than plastic. But the problem is there's just so much mislabeling. Yeah, that it's not really a good solution. But yeah, thanks for the question.
I also don't know how to raise my hand, but I have a question too. Hi, thank you so much. This was great. I have a
No
question. I'm a teacher, an elementary school teacher, and we have to wear the medical grade plastic masks, and we have to use 2 a day, which are disposable, obviously. Do you see a way around that by the end of the pandemic? Do you think there's
So
other options? I know I read an article that at the University of British Columbia, they're working on something, but I don't know.
So quick question. So you have to wear a specific kind of single-use mask.
Yeah, the medical grade, the blue and white masks, the ones we're seeing everywhere. Teachers, every teacher. I don't know about Ontario. In my school board in Ottawa, Carleton District School Board, we have to wear 2 a day. And face shields.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah, when policy says, "Oh, you have to do this," that's where there's limits to what the individual can do, unless you can change that policy. That's pretty much how everything works. There's some way to change their mind about the the kind of mask that you have to wear. Otherwise, yeah, you just have to keep wearing.
The other question is a lot saying that there's carcinogens in there, and do you know anything about that as well?
Carcinogens in
Like in
plastic?
those masks, in those plastic masks, are they? There's so many.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that before too. Well, not the mask, but in various plastic products.
Yeah.
So I mentioned before that plastic is a variety of different kinds of materials.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's different polymers, different shapes, different sizes, and every combination of shape, size, and polymer has a different toxicity. That's why in the literature, it's so hard to quantify, just figure out exactly how toxic microplastics are, because there's so many different combinations. So in some combinations, actually my professor, Chelsea, she did a study where she exposed fish to a specific kind of plastic, and she saw that they were more stressed. And I think she also took a piece of their liver and found like a tumor in there. So
wow.
I think that's where the carcinogenic part comes from.
Okay.
But yeah, the mask though, it's very different from the plastic she used. So there's no real way of knowing it unless you do a lab study specifically on the mask itself.
Okay. Yeah, I watched her in Microplastics Madness. She was interviewed in the documentary, and she said in that documentary that she said we weren't sure about the toxicity of very small microplastics yet. So it's interesting to hear the follow-up on that.
Yeah, it's such a hard question to answer. Really.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No problem.
I have another question.
Yes.
That's okay. So it seems like I'm just thinking back to like growing up. It seems like most people's habits of doing any form of recycling or reusing or upcycling or any form of trying to prolong the use of a supposed single-use tool or container or cutlery are influenced by our family. So what my parents used to do is kind of what I grew up learning about, and what I would continue to do as I like come to college and influence maybe my roommates and things like that. But if someone else grew up in a household where there wasn't that much knowledge in what is the most proper or most helpful way to reuse and recycle or prolong the life of a container or cutlery or things like that, it seems like the education and the learning of it comes much later, and it only comes if they attend, for example, your workshop here, or if they make an initiative to go out of their way to learn more about it. So, and then now I'm learning from this workshop that recycling, which I always thought was like the most noble way to tackle waste, is actually not super noble at all, and it's actually not super useful or effective. So what do you think can be changed in either our education or in creating more public awareness and public understanding of what is the most effective way to deal with waste management?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I really wish that even the things I learned much later on, right? I learned this as I was doing my research and speaking with people, going to workshops here and there, everywhere. Like little bits of knowledge you gain, like you said, from different places. I really wish that this knowledge could have been more accessible either in school or by talking to my family members. Yeah, we all grow up in different environments, right? Some of us were blessed to have knowledge very early on about waste management practices. Some of us we don't talk about as much in our families. So we have to learn about it ourselves, and that's perfectly fine. I think, there's actually an initiative we're doing as part of the trash team. I think I mentioned this at the very beginning, but we're creating lesson plans on plastic pollution and waste literacy for middle school and high school students. And in these workshops, they're 1 hour long. We talk about the solutions hierarchy, about the plastic life cycle, etc., etc. And it's funny you mentioned this because one of my colleagues, she went to the United States. I don't remember what state it was, but she was talking to this group of high schoolers, and they've never seen recycling before. They've never seen a recycling bin before. They have no idea what it is. And this family, they burn all of their waste in their backyard, and they think that it's the cleanest way to get rid of waste. Yeah. So, we all start at different ages when it comes to learning about this. The earlier, the better. But there's no problem if you start later as well, as long as you feel empowered and feel that you can make a difference to your life. Yeah, whatever works. But yeah,
Thank you.
it always helps
Would I
to.
be
Yeah,
able
no problem.
to, yeah, would I be able to find the lesson plans or the waste literacy kind of programs that you all launched online or where can-
Absolutely. All the resources are on our website, UFT
Okay.
Trash Team.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I'll check it out. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, a bit of a long answer.
Hi, I had one more question, just a really
Yeah.
quick question.
Sure.
Are there any creative solutions or alternative material that we should be advocating for? So for example, I don't think that plastic consumption is going to go down. I assume that it's only going to exponentially keep going up as population grows and income grows. So is there something that we should be pushing for, or is there any kind of creative solution, or are we going to be seeing any new, alternative materials coming to the market? Like, how do you recommend that we package, stuff, vitamins, fruits, things going forward?
Yeah, it's a big question. It's a tough one. So let me begin by saying this. Yeah, the policies that will help us to reach a circular economy, like you said, they're going to take time. And it's not going to be like you wake up the next day and everything's solved. Obviously, there are some things that we need to do right now, even if we don't have a circular economy. And as you mentioned, what are some of these alternatives that we can turn to? So I did mention that every single use item has its flaws. So plastic, the fact that it comes from fossil fuels, that it never degrades in the environment. Paper, it uses a lot of water. It's also unsustainable. Metal, they all have their flaws. If there's one thing that I think causes the least harm, remember I mentioned the compostable plastic? So there are some on the market, but they're just really expensive because they're not subsidized the way fossil fuels are. There's actually, yeah, I can send you, I can send GLO the 5 gyros report that tested the compostable products. They have a list of them. That is one thing that I think is probably the least the most acceptable poison. What's that term? Like the best of the worst.
The least of the two evils.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is this term? Yeah, the what he said. The other thing is totally lost my train of thought. So yeah, biodegradable plastics, and but that is what we should do at this time. But obviously, as we work towards the ultimate solution, these alternatives, they slowly start to obviously still need to wean ourselves all off of them. But at this time, I think they are the best alternative. Yeah, if that's what you're looking for. More questions? Anton, or was that the person who just spoke?
No, I have a question. So you mentioned that some of the companies kind of like greenwash their products and make it hard to like determine whether or not their product is actually biodegradable or not. Do you have any tips for like ways to actually like discern between the two, like whether or not it's like actually biodegradable or not?
Yeah, good question. So I think you need to learn the terms that they use for the different kinds of plastics. I can give you a 30-second crash course on this, but please go read the 5 gyros report. I can send it to GLO. So, okay, bioplastics. They're plastics made from biomatter, but they still become polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, etc. So bioplastics are not compostable. But there's another thing called biopolymers. Biopolymers are made from chitin, natural materials that will break down. So those are the ones that are actually compostable. And there's many other different terms they use, as well as a whole list of actually compostable products, like compostable diapers, compostable cutlery, in the 5 gyros report. So I highly recommend you read that. Yeah, to know what terms they use.
So in the interest of time, I think that was good. That was our final question. Thank you, Alice, again, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So in order to further our impact, we have prepared a home waste tracker that we will send out to you over the next 4 weeks. Basically, it's kind of like what Alice showed you in her presentation. It's a data sheet, but we have simplified it into a survey form so that you just fill out every week at the end of each week for the next 4 weeks. And our vision for this program is to help all of us reach our waste reduction goals by holding each other accountable and by becoming more mindful of the waste that we generate. And from today, from the elections, as all of you guys have seen, we recognize the power that individual actions can make. And we all have the ability to create impact through our everyday choices. And I really hope all of you join us on this challenge to bring positive change to our community. And as an added incentive for this challenge, we are introducing a prize for those who participate. And I think Stephanie can give us more details on what this will look like.
Yeah, we can definitely send this out after this workshop too, in the interest of time. But as a quick summary, we're doing a social media challenge where, we'll send you these surveys like Tiffany said, and then we'll basically enter you into a lottery if you're able to complete all 4 weeks of the audit. And then at the end, we'll pick a winner to give a package of biodegradable or recyclable prizes.
Yeah, probably something like beeswax to replace those plastic covers. Just an idea. We haven't finalized it yet. But anyway, thanks everyone for joining us again. And we'll send you all the information and the links to the U of T trash team if you want to view more of their resources and videos. And this will conclude our session today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.